Good evening, welcome. Still got quite a few seats up here reserved for the people who aren't yet seating. So if you're standing, we've got seats for you right here. Alright, welcome, happy holidays. The year is almost over. So thank you all for coming to our third annual ClimateLink and Data Science for Sustainability holiday party and meetup. So pretty exciting tonight. We've got Dr. Jonathan Foley, who's the head of Project Drawdown. It's an awesome book. If you don't have it already, you should have bought it. Anyway, here's our schedule. We've already done the first part, eating, talking to each other. So one thing that you'll notice, or you may have noticed, we asked you to put stickers on your badges if you are hiring or job seeking, because this is something that we do at every event. If you put a green badge, green sticker on your name badge, you're different, but it has no significance other than, yeah, there you go. You can hire and maybe you're investing. But then, so we'll have the talk, and then afterwards we'll have cake, sparkling cider, we'll have a raffle, and we'll get to talk to each other some more. Real quick, oh, I didn't update this. Pete, who has been our host for several years, a couple years now, has retired and is being replaced by Ryan. Ryan, what's your last name? Stroop. So Ryan works in the building performance area and also the tool lending library, and he is our awesome host for tonight, so please give a warm round of applause.
Happy to have you here. Just want to ask how many of you are first-time visitors to the Energy Center? Well, we'd like you to come back. If you've been here before, you know we do free classes that are publicly funded. We give advice if you have energy efficiency projects or renewable energy projects and you want some guidance. And we also have tools. I know Robbie has borrowed some tools, he'll talk about these, but you can borrow measurement equipment from us for free from our lending library. We have over 5,000 tools in this program. Raise your hand if you've borrowed a tool from the lending library before. You can talk to these people. It's a pretty incredible program. And I did want to just mention we have a whole calendar of classes that will start in 2020. There's a few classes left this year, but again, check those out. We do classes on a wide range of topics. I did want to mention one in particular. We do a water showcase every spring. So if you're interested in water conservation, that's an event that I coordinate. It's our biggest event of the year. We'll have about 500 to 600 people here focused on conserving water and the connection between water and energy. So you can look for that. And I'll hand it back to Robbie. Oh, I need to talk about safety and egress. There are some safety issues here I have to discuss. So the egress for this room is through those double doors on what is the left side of the classroom for all of you. Out those doors and down some steps, you'll be out the back of the building. So that's your fastest means of egress. You can always exit through the front of the building. It just takes a little longer. If an event requires that we exit the building, we'll meet at the corner of 4th and Howard Street. There's a carousel there. That's our convening location, and I'll meet you there and determine if it's safe to continue. In case of an earthquake, because the outside of our building is clad in glass, we will not exit. You'll duck and cover and wait for the building to stop shaking. And again, I'll determine if it's safe to continue. The front desk has an AED if we need it. Raise your hand if you're CPR certified. I just got recertified recently. You can tap one of us if a medical emergency arises. And other details, the restrooms are out the classroom door to the right. The food and any other biodegradable waste can go in the compost bins that are scattered around the building, so help us with that. And I think that's it. Hand it back to Robbie.
Right. Yeah. So if you're wondering, I borrowed an infrared camera to look at insulation and air sealing issues at mine and a few others' houses, and also a CO2 logger, and we're at 859 parts per million in this room currently.
Perfectly within reasonable limits.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, as long as it doesn't get above 1,000, 1,200, we'll be decently okay. So next, well, why don't y'all come up into the camera shot. This is Alyssa and Jason from Data Science for Sustainability, and my crew is somewhere. There's Aaron. Aaron back there, he's my co-organizer as well. Let's flip these. Let's do better know a neighbor first.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, no, you can do it.
Okay.
All right, hey, thanks for coming. Thank you, Ryan, for the safest meetup of the year. Appreciate it. As Ravi noted, Alyssa and I co-run Data Science for Sustainability. One of our things that we like to do, I'm calling it tonight Better Know a Neighbor, or fun Better Know a District. You guys watch Colbert. And Mimi, who's not here tonight, is another one of our organizers who's not here, so I'm picking on her. But what we like to do is community environment, find someone you don't know. We're going to give you a minute or two, answer a question, just say hello, get to know someone, friendly face, catch up with them over cake. So think of the answer, your favorite holiday that's not Christmas or Hanukkah.
Within hand reach from where you are, don't walk all the way.
Okay. That's about the neighbor, not that. Okay, so think of a holiday, we'll give you 10 seconds, make eye contact with someone who's within hand reach, and then answer the question, and then we'll come back. So climate change has really come to the fore. I've been in the transition of fossil fuel, away from fossil fuels, fighting climate change since 2000, and I was always the sort of odd person out of the group. But now, like, the Times Person of the Year is a climate activist, so it's pretty awesome, like, how much this is into the zeitgeist of our times. Some important things that have happened this year within sort of the climate realm. Just kicking off the year, PG&E, our host, whom we love dearly, filed for bankruptcy because of financial damages exacerbated by climate change-driven wildfires. And then also, you see here in the bottom, fires in the Amazon burning. Then some good news, Berkeley banned natural gas in new buildings. That's me right there, testifying to get gas out of the buildings. We had one of the biggest ice melts in Greenland this year. You can see the shading in the colors, the extent of melt in all the different areas. In September, the UN launched the Principles for Responsible Banking, similar to the Principles for Responsible Investment. So there's roughly 1/3 of the banks representing 1/3 of all assets, banking assets in the world, were there signing. This is the CEO of ING, committing to move away from fossil fuels. We also had the lowest price ever for solar plus battery storage in LA, moving away, so they skipped a gas plant. This is the Carquinez Bridge. Thank you, I forgot the name of the bridge. So from the Kincaid, around the Kincaid fire in October, I flew over it. It was terrifying. Just on Tuesday, the first ever electric airplane flew. This is Harbor Air up in Vancouver. So they do Vancouver, Seattle, and there's seaplanes, which is really awesome to see. And then the fires in New South Wales and Australia. So there's several fires, but they've come together, and if you overlaid it, like, it'd be bigger than the state of Rhode Island. It's absolutely massive. So the air quality index around 50 is sort of the cutoff for healthy.
at 200, it gets quite dangerous. It's at 2,600 in city. Like, it is insane. And again, but you know, climate change is in the zeitgeist, so things are looking up. You know, our group, we did 26 events this year across 3 cities. We did 8 partner events with 4 conferences. We grew, we're at 2,600 total members. Brought in some new organizers to get new ideas rather than just mine, thankfully. And next year, so this is a word cloud of all, we asked you all what you want to cover. This is what you responded with. And you know, it wasn't my influence that you said climate finance. If you don't know it, I'm starting a bank focused on this transition. So, but we've got jobs, personal action, microgrids, which we're actually covering in January. So we've already got on the list many of these topics. And then we don't have these scheduled just yet, but these are some of the other topics and speakers that we've got.
And data science for sustainability. So the 4 of us organizers, we have 2 people not here tonight. Mimi is on a plane, and Ben actually is caring to a sick child. But the 4 of us have been running this for 5 years now. The meetup has been going on for probably closer to 8 or 9 years. But yeah, this year we had 8 events all over the Bay Area. And we had 7 different hosting venues. We had our first ever collaboration with BERC, which is Berkeley Energy Resource Collaboration, or Collective, I don't know the C. It's Berkeley. And then we grew to be 4,200 members. And for 2020, more data, more sustainability. If you guys have things you want to hear about, the one thing we have on our agenda for January is we will be hearing from John Anderson from OhmConnect. He actually used to work at PG&E, but now he's the Director of Policy at OhmConnect, and he's going to be talking through some of the data he goes through with actually bidding OhmConnect resources into the CAISO market. Yeah, so that should be really exciting. And if you guys have any other ideas or things you want to hear for talks, please let us know. My name's Alyssa, Jason's right over here, and yeah, that's us.
So now I'd like to welcome Dr. Jonathan Foley, the Executive Director for Project Drawdown. He has a PhD in atmospheric science. His bio is too long, like we could take the rest of the meetup for me just to read it, but he's been a university professor. He was a senior scholar and the Executive Director for the California Academy of Sciences just before moving. He has TED Talks, he's spoken, he's written for National Geographic, New York Times, CNN, the list goes on. So his bona fides are very long, and now he runs one of the coolest projects and organizations that we have fighting climate change. So please give a warm round of applause for Dr. Foley.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here tonight. Oh, good. Okay, cool. And to be surrounded by people who care about energy and climate change. And just down the street is the American Geophysical Union has been having their meeting for the last week, which is like 25,000 science nerds who work on planet Earth and other planets, actually, for that matter. Anybody here from the AGU crowd too? So, all right. Hey, welcome to San Francisco if you're from out of town for that too. So this is kind of Climate Nerd Central. We're in right now, basically this whole block. So this is really good. And hopefully we'll talk about some of these issues tonight. So I was going to give a kind of presentation giving you all a bit of an update on where kind of we are with Project Drawdown, but I wanted to kind of set a larger context because what brings us all together, I think, here tonight, if I turn that on, it works a lot better. There we go. Is that we're all here because we want to see a better future emerge for this planet. Oh, there we go. This would be really close to it, apparently. And really about which future we're going to choose. I'd like to believe that we still have options here for either choosing a really good future or a not so good future. And tonight maybe we can work on an idea of how to choose a better one. But before we think about the future, sometimes it's helpful to think about our past and to think about how did we get where we are today anyway. And if we talk to our evolutionary biology friends and our anthropology friends, we find that there's something like a human being. Our ancient ancestors started walking this planet about 6 million years ago. That's roughly 300,000 generations of something like a human being born and living their life and passing away and carrying on to the next generation. 300,000 times. During almost all of that time, maybe 299,998 of those generations, let's say, we had a really great strategy. We could use resources. We could grow our population locally. We could even leave behind some pollution and just move on. Because the Earth was essentially infinite compared to the human footprint. And that was a very, very good survival strategy. Grow population, use resources, don't worry about pollution, it'll be fine. And when your goal is to survive and pass your genes on to the next generation, that's a pretty good strategy for a little while. But now it's not, because we have gotten very big and now the planet seems actually quite small. So here we are today. This is what the Earth looks like now. We can even recognize our footprint from energy alone, from outer space. You know, if E.T. comes back now after that movie a few decades ago, going to see a bit of surprise. We've grown a little bit since the last time they visited. So during the last 50 years or so, we've seen an extreme, explosive growth of the human footprint, whether it's in population, urbanization, or the economy. In fact, in the last 50 years or so, we've seen about a doubling of human population, a 5.5-fold increase in inflation-adjusted economy, and that has tripled the demand for food, that has roughly doubled the demand for water, and about tripled the demand of fossil fuel energy in just 50 years. I just turned 50 a little recently, and so just during my lifetime, this all just changed dramatically. In fact, in that 50 years, what's kind of amazing is we've changed more than all human evolution combined in just the last 50 years. So no wonder things seem a little bit odd, because we are at an inflection point in the history of our species. Everything's changing right now. Even the way we change is changing right now. So that's kind of why we're in this dilemma. I like to remind people of this too. We're not facing a planetary kind of emergency because we're evil or because we're stupid. We're having it because it's unlike anything else we've ever experienced in human history. We didn't have the rules. We didn't know what to do. So here we are facing this big challenge of, basically disrupting a planet under our very, very feet. So how do we think about that? We're going to talk about climate change, of course, but when I talk to other audiences, I sometimes begin with more obvious changes to the environment. Things that are happening to land, to water, and so on, because those are a little bit more tangible, maybe, than climate change. For example, this picture here shows a rainforest in the Bolivian Amazon in the 1970s. We see here the very first kind of a dirt road being built through this region, and the first rancher in history in this forest here. So there's one guy out here with Bee Gees albums and bell-bottoms or whatever, ranching in the Amazon. But let's go back to the same place in the early 2000s, and it's actually much more than that now. And this is the effect of globalization. This is all soybeans being grown, shipping to China, being fed to pigs. As China got wealthier and more urban, more people started eating meat. And that created a huge demand for agricultural, especially animal feeds, soy, corn, and so on. So now South America and the US are exporting a lot of animal feeds to China today. So we see the effects of globalization. We see this even in the most remote places of the planet, like the Amazon. So we see now, for example, about a 30% loss of tropical rainforest since the 1940s, roughly. And that, alongside energy, is a major contributor to climate change. It's one of the other big CO2 emitters, is deforestation. We also see the footprint of agriculture. Agriculture, I'll show you in a minute, is by far one of the biggest contributors to climate change, and yet we don't talk about it enough. This is the footprint of food on planet Earth. This is work I used to do at the University of Minnesota with a bunch of colleagues. These are satellite data and ground-based data kind of stitched together. Love data science folks here. And this is a picture showing in green all the world's plant-based farms, essentially, where we grow our crops. And tan is where we grow our animals. That's the pastures and rangelands. By the way, the green areas also grow a lot of stuff for the animals in the brown areas. In fact, 75% of all the agricultural land on Earth is doing one thing, growing meat. Okay? And the total agricultural land of the planet is about 35 to 40% of the planet. And it's the best parts of the planet too. You notice that the high Arctic is not in agriculture, neither are the deserts. The only kind of good productive lands left are the rainforest, and that's why we're clearing them now. So land use is obvious, would transform an entire planet. We're also doing the same with water. Even before climate change has become an issue, we have devastated global water supplies in many ways, just because we're using it badly. Here in California, we have countless examples of this, whether it's alfalfa. By the way, alfalfa in California is the biggest user of water in California. It uses more water than all the households and cities in California combined. And we're shipping it to be animal feed to Saudi Arabia and China. That's insane. People talk about almonds. No, it's alfalfa. This is the biggest problem here. And here, this is the Soviet Union in the 1960s. This is an old spy satellite image showing the Aral Sea. The Aral Sea now doesn't exist because we drained it, essentially. The Aral Sea is surrounded by desert. It doesn't rain here very much. It was fed by two big rivers draining snowmelt from China. And the Soviets, like us Americans, dammed up a bunch of rivers over here, and they used that water to irrigate the Kazakh desert to grow cotton, and wiped out one of the world's largest inland seas. This is about 300 miles across, to put that in perspective. One of my students made a great t-shirt once that pissed off a whole bunch of ag people. It was fantastic, I loved it. It was a t-shirt that showed those two pictures, and he said, "We drained the Aral Sea, and all we got were these lousy cotton t-shirts." We actually went to an ag convention, and the people from Cotton Unlimited were not pleased. But they don't buy cotton. Anyway, this is Soviet cotton, well, not Kazakhstan. Anyway, so we have changed a planet's worth of land, we've changed a planet's worth of water, and of course now we add the specter of climate change. I start with land and water because when you talk about climate change, we're inherently talking about something invisible, right? Greenhouse gases, we know, are changing the Earth's climate. I hope I don't have to argue with you about this, but sometimes we do. But it's an invisible gas because it's, by its very nature, solar radiation and visible light that our eyes are sensitive to go right through CO2, methane, nitrous oxide, water vapor, all those greenhouse gases. But if we saw in the far infrared wavelengths that Earth radiates to outer space, they would look cloudy and opaque, and we'd see that heat is trapped and re-radiated by these so-called greenhouse gases. Well, we've known about this actually for a very long time. The idea of a greenhouse effect was discovered, or first written about, I should say, by Joseph Fourier in the 1820s, almost 200 years ago, the French physicist. The first person to actually give experimental evidence proving that CO2 actually warmed the air. Actually published this in the early 1850s, in 1853. Anybody here know who that is? Oh, somebody with a hand up very quickly. Yes?
Is that the Arrhenius?
Nope, that was in the 1890s. This is 40 years before that.
Well, the Wikipedia is wrong with this then.
Yes, Wikipedia is wrong on this.
Go fix it.
Arrhenius did the first calculation of what a doubling of CO2 would do. By the way, he was exactly right. The most sophisticated supercomputer models today are keeping track basically what Arrhenius did with pencil and paper in the 1890s in Stockholm. And the first person to actually show this experimentally was a woman named Eunice Foote, who was an American scientist who was basically erased from the history books. She has also worked in the women's suffrage movement in America in the 1850s. She was a scientist, published the very first scientific report on this. 4 years later, John Tyndall, a British male scientist, published exactly the same result in the same journal, and he got all the credit. And she got nothing. We have no surviving pictures of her, no surviving sketches or paintings, no buildings are named after her around the world, nothing. This is an injustice in the extreme, and every time I give a talk, I try to mention her name just to make up for it a little tiny bit. And I have a doctorate in this stuff. I've been working this for 30 years. I never heard of her until 3 years ago. So maybe you can spread the word about her too. Her name is Eunice Foote. Do the world a favor and talk about this. Anyway, we've known about climate change for about 200 years. And guess what? We're changing the climate. We all know the story. We added things like CO2 above what nature had in the atmosphere. This is just one of the greenhouse gases. CO2 increased by about 50%, and when you add stuff that traps heat, guess what happens? Oh, sorry, I'm done. That's CO2. Then we can see what temperatures do if we add on top of that. This clicker is not very good. I'm going to have to get a new one. Okay, so this is the temperature increase that you can see sort of...
you can swap with you got a second one.
I think it's okay, I got it. I'll just have to stand close to it. So we can see with different scales and all this kind of stuff. You add stuff that traps heat, guess what? Things warm up. No big surprise. So here we are facing an incredible challenge. Climate change is going to be one of them, but we're doing many, many, many things simultaneously that are degrading and disrupting the planet. And what I worry about a lot is we're placing a huge burden on future generations, not just the next generation, but basically generations to follow for thousands of years and maybe beyond. So unlike us, we inherited a lot of good things from our ancestors. You know, we didn't have to invent fire or the wheel or the internet for that matter. We inherited so much of the great things people did before us so we could live better lives. But we are leaving behind a degraded and disturbed world for the future, and we're doing it basically on purpose now, because we know that this is happening, we're just choosing not to do much about it. So I think that's something we need to work on and do a better job. Okay, well that's the depressing part of the talk, by the way. Okay, we're going to move on from that. Usually when an environmental or a climate scientist gets in front of a crowd, we just scare the shit out of people. And I did my job, check. Okay, good. And we might sometimes say the situation is hopeless, because it kind of sounds that way sometimes, doesn't it? It sounds like, oh my God, there's nothing we can do. That's nonsense. Of course it isn't hopeless. Well, there are many things we can do, and the future is still up to us to make it better. Because at the same time we're having all these kind of global environmental pressures, a lot of other things are happening that are making the world fantastic. And we should seize some of those and build upon them to build a better future. For example, in those same 50 years, a lot of really good things happened too, and we should be reminding ourselves of that. For example, 50 years ago, the average person on Earth only lived to be 55. Today it's 71 and climbing steadily. 50 years ago, the average woman on Earth had over 5 children. On average. Imagine more. That's half, that's the median. Oh my God. Today it's 2.4 and falling faster than anybody ever predicted. Most countries are well below replacement fertility rates now, which is totally unexpected. We are also the most literate people who've ever walked the planet. It's over 85% literacy rates. 50 years ago, it's 50%. Back in 1900, it was 15%. And at that time, it was the highest in human history. So literacy is a new phenomenon for human history. That's pretty amazing. We're more urban. I don't know if that's good or not, but we are. We're more mobile, we're more connected, and we're far less violent. There's still too much, obviously, but fewer people experience violence and warfare today than anybody who's ever walked the face of the earth. So in many ways, the world has gotten better. So here we have this kind of Dickensian kind of paradox. Is it the best of times, the worst of times? Is it a moment of a planetary crisis and disaster? Or is it a moment of an incredible opportunity? In other words, are we getting the Mad Max movie or the Star Trek movie? Which one, And guess what? The answer to that question is, it's up to you. Which one do you want? Because the future isn't written yet at all. We get to build it. We will determine the future we want, if we choose to. And it's a choice. Right now we're choosing to abdicate that opportunity, just throw it away. I don't think we want to do that, and I don't think you do either. So let's seize that choice and make a better future with it. And we need to do that with a new approach. Okay? Now, remember I mentioned, for 6 million years we had one strategy, which is like, hey, don't worry about the environment, just use up resources, have lots of babies, pass on your genes, don't worry about pollution. That's a good strategy if you're scrambling out in the savannas for a long time. But now, with a full planet, with 7 billion people using a lot of stuff, we need a totally different approach that respects the physics and biological limitations of a planet, and we call that sustainability. We all know that word. A lot of us have dedicated our lives to this word, the idea that we should live our lives, meet our needs and our aspirations without compromising the needs and aspirations of people in the future, right? So I love this concept, I'm sure you do too, but I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. I freaking hate this word. Oh my God. Could you come up with a word? Who came up with a word like this? Well, I know, it's probably somebody kind of like us, right? A bunch of scientists and bureaucrats and engineers. We didn't talk to the marketing people. This word sucks, okay? If I went up to you and said, hey, how's your marriage these days? And you said, well, it's sustainable. I'll be like, oh God, we can get counselors, you can get help, really, it's okay, we'll help you out. That's terrible, that kind of sucks, So, and sustainable, that's what we're trying to ask people to get excited about? Come on. We ought to be talking about thriving. Hey, this world we talk about, this environmentally sustainable world, it's gonna be awesome, it's gonna be cool, we're gonna thrive. We're gonna have people and nature thriving together and do so now and into the future. It's gonna be freaking awesome. It's gonna be great. You want people to join you, you have to have something they want to join. And I think a sustainable future is gonna be a great future if we think about it the right way. So let's think about it the right way and remind people a better world is possible. But to get to that better world, one of many things we have to address is climate change. We shouldn't be so myopically focused on this alone. It's interwoven with so many other issues around justice and equity and economics and culture and so many other issues. But climate change will be central to a lot of how we're going to pivot to the future. It's what we often call a threat multiplier. It's the thing that makes everything else harder if we don't solve it. It touches our water, it touches our food, it touches security and health, the economy, justice, everything. So if we don't fix climate change, it's going to be really hard to have a thriving world. So let's tackle this problem alongside others, though. We should remember that it's not the only problem we have. So that's what we do, this thing called Project Drawdown. I've been here about a year now, kind of rebooting the organization to, we're going to call it Drawdown 2.0.
They asked me to lower the lights a little bit.
Oh, okay, cool. I was like, wow, am I already done? This is cool. No, like, I had a little more fun. Yeah, if anybody has cool lighting tech, it's going to be this building.
Keep going.
Yeah, okay, yeah, it's a little, you really have to go to the closet to turn it on. What's back
It's
here?
not a closet, it's a control room.
Holy cow, look at all, oh my God. You ought to see what's back here, it's really cool. Okay, so Project Drawdown, we are basically working on climate solutions. You probably have heard about this organization because our first version wrote a book in 2017 you've probably seen called Drawdown. If you'd love to go get that book, great, that's fantastic. We're kind of going to make it obsolete pretty soon. And, wow, it's touchy. I'm just going to keep going. So in February, I should point out that we were going to be kind of launching an entirely new framework for Drawdown with entirely new solutions, entirely new numbers, everything will be new. And it'll be on February 20th, 2020. We were serious about Drawdown 2.0 because we're doing it at 02, 20, 20. We had to be cute about it. That's also when we're probably going to be done with it, so that worked out. So stay tuned for that. I'm giving you a little bit of a sneak peek of it today. But it'll be a very different framework, a whole bunch of new solutions, new numbers, new quantification. We're also launching something called Drawdown Learn, which is kind of an educational channel. Go to our website and stay tuned. Starting in January, we'll be offering new online free webinars around like the science of climate solutions, personal actions we can take. I'm going to do a whole unit just on like global food systems in climate change, which is of a lot of interest. We'd like to add more, but that's what we're going to start with. We're launching something called Drawdown Communities, which would be a network of mainly grassroots organizations around the world who, by themselves, we didn't do any of this, just declare themselves to be a Drawdown community. And they're doing all this great stuff without any help from us at first. So we're going to help network them and provide resources. And we just started a new business consortium called Drawdown Labs, which is looking to kind of shatter the old ceiling of what climate commitments are being made by companies. A lot of companies are now patting themselves on the back saying, hey, we're going to be Paris compliant by 2050. I'm like, great. So you said success means we're no longer destroying the planet sometime in the future long after you retire. Yay for you. That's great. Maybe we could do a little better, because we're in a bloody emergency and governments are failing. Maybe you could help. So we're working with companies now, about a dozen of them, to create a new model where we say, no, companies should do far more. One example of this, and then I'll go on, is Intuit is the founding partner of Drawdown Labs with us. The company makes like TurboTax and QuickBooks. They've committed to not only erasing their carbon footprint, they're going to help the world erase 50 times that much and do it by 2030. They're doing it by working with their customers, the communities in which they operate, their employees and partners. Drawdown's their kind of key strategy partner. We're super psyched to do that. We're going to have about 10 other major leaders around the world saying, hey, it's not enough just to clean up your backyard footprint. Let's help the world make a better future and do it now. So we're really excited where Drawdown's going next. But let me tell you about what we have done and a little bit of the core work underway to really think about climate solutions. So Drawdown refers to a moment in time. This is the history of greenhouse gas levels. This is kind of the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere right now. If we do nothing, we'll just keep going up and up and up. It's business as usual, if you will. That world is no longer tenable. We just cannot accept that. We will have to transition away from that and do something else and basically bend the curve. The moment that we hit that inflection point where greenhouse gases no longer increase and they start going back down, where that blue dot is, that is the moment of drawdown. That is the entire kind of raison d'etre of our organization. Our organization says we are working for that moment to achieve this as quickly, safely, and equitably as possible. So how do we do that? How do we get to that point where greenhouse gases decline? We have to do it soon. We have to do it because the longer we wait, the warmer the planet gets. The warmer the planet gets, the more damage we do. Bottom line is, don't think about invisible lines in the sand like, oh, 1.5 degrees, that's the boundary, or 2.3. No, that's bad thinking. Don't do that, please. I mean, do you really think like at 1.49999 degrees we're fine, and 1.50001 we're totally screwed? The planet doesn't work like that. We've already caused damage. We're causing it now. So we should stop as soon as possible. And if we could do it at 1.4, great. If we can't do it then, do it at 1.5. To miss that, do it at 1.6. Keep working on it. Delay equals damage. The sooner we do it, the better we'll be. But don't ever concede defeat. Some people ask me that, by the way, like, oh, is it too late? Like, no. God, no. As long as there's one child still left alive on this planet, there's one whale still left alive on this planet, one tree left alive, I'm not giving up. Are you? So, let's keep going. Do not hoist the white flag on the planet, please. Okay, don't do that. This is the worst fear. Fear and giving up is the biggest problem we face. Not technology, not policy, it's fear and giving up. So let's not do that. Okay, how do we achieve drawdown? How do we get there? Well, first we're going to look at the problem. I'm going to nerd out with you. I think I can confidently do that in this room a little bit. That we have to kind of recognize where the issues are. Okay, greenhouse gases, little primer. About 62% of the climate problem comes from energy and fossil fuels. The combustion of fossil fuels, coal, oil, natural gas, the rest, releases at a greenhouse gas equivalency about 62% of the climate change problem. So it's the biggest single sector, but it's not the only one. So if you fix the energy system, you solve 62% of the climate problem, basically. But there's a little bit more work to do, because CO2 is also emitted by chemicals, especially cement. When cement is curing, it releases CO2. In fact, if cement were a country, it'd be the third largest emitter of CO2 in the world, after China and the United States. Well, basically cement is basically China today. So that's a big part of their emissions. They use more concrete today in the last 10 years than all of human history did before, which is kind of amazing. We also have CO2 emitted from land use, deforestation primarily. In the Amazon, you burn a tree, you burn coal, same effect, you burn carbon, whether it's alive or dead, you form CO2. We also, of course, have other gases that trap heat, principally methane. Methane is mainly biological in origin, but some of it also comes out of natural gas infrastructure because methane is natural gas. So fracking, leaky natural gas pipes, leaky appliances, all those release methane, and that's something we need to be paying attention to. But a lot of it is biological in origin. Do we know where the biological sources are? Right? Cows, yeah. Oh, good. Somebody said it right. Cow burps. Okay, so cows don't fart methane. They burp methane. Yeah, they burp methane. It's the four stomachs, the rumen inside. They fart methane, but no more than any other mammal, including us. But they burp far more. So that's the one thing people always remember from my talk. I don't know why. It's a burps, farts joke. I don't know. So cow burps and fracking basically is this stuff. And then we have a couple other weird gases that sometimes people forget about. One called nitrous oxide, another agricultural greenhouse gas source. And that's when we overuse fertilizers and use too much manure on our farm fields. And then we have the last one, the so-called F gases, the fluorinated gases. These are things like sulfohexafluorine, hydrofluorocarbons, and so on that are really potent kind of super pollutants. They're super greenhouse gases. One of them we use mainly in refrigerants. Remember we used to use CFCs back in the 70s, we got rid of those to help the ozone layer? Well, whoops, we replaced them with HFCs, which are ozone friendly, but not climate friendly. And if they leak out into the atmosphere, they trap about 5,000 times more heat, molecule for molecule, as CO2 does. And there are about 2 billion people in the world today about to buy their first air conditioners and refrigerators, and they live in places with no regulation at all on the disposal of HFCs. So that 2% number is projected to grow to about 8 to 10% in the next 30 years. And that's why refrigerants turn out to be a very important climate solution. So this is the greenhouse gas suite. Yes, energy, materials, land use, agriculture and fracking, agriculture again, materials. I kind of color-coded them from where they come from. The energy sector, materials, or land use. It's a little bit of everything. We need all of us to work on the climate problem. So that's kind of the problem. Where are the solutions going to come from? Well, solutions to climate change follow in 3 big buckets. The first one's the duh one, the obvious one. Hey, We're dumping crap in the sky. And it's hurting the planet. You know what we had to do? Stop, right? You know, hey, why don't we just stop doing that, right? You know, first rule of, you know, getting out of a hole, stop digging it. You know, so the same thing with the atmosphere. Before we talk about fancy carbon sinks and all that kind of stuff, stop the bloody emissions. They eventually have to go to zero. So that's what we have to do. Well, where do the emissions come from? This is the global picture. Of course, it's different in the US or California. This picture varies a lot, but this is the global inventory. About a quarter of climate change is caused from the production of electricity, again, burning mainly coal and natural gas. Second is about equal is agriculture. Here, where are we? Come on, there we go. Food, agriculture, and land use is another quarter, roughly. So electricity and food are equal, and they're half of the climate problem. How many people knew that? Yeah, 3, 4, well, okay, this is a really well-informed audience. Mostly people never heard that before. Because electricity gets a lot of the attention, but food is equal, which is kind of amazing. Industry is about 20%. Then we have transportation. In California, by the way, globally, transportation is 14% of emissions. In California, it's 48. Electricity is 12. So our big problem in California is transport, not electrical grids here nowadays. And then we have buildings, the in situ release of greenhouse gases from buildings. That doesn't count the electricity generated going into the building. These are emissions at the point of origin. So when you have an electricity production is the power plant, but a lot of those electrons go into buildings. So buildings kind of get a double whammy. They produce greenhouse gases inside the building, the furnaces, boilers, hot water heaters, and the rest. And they play a big role here, and they influence transportation, too, from land use planning. And then lastly is everything else. A lot of it is fugitive emissions of methane, the energy used in the energy sector itself, and a bunch of other wacky stuff. But the easy thing to remember is 90% of climate change is caused by one hand's worth of stuff. 5 things: electricity, food, industry, transport, and buildings. Okay? 5 things. So let's dive in. So what we're looking at in Drawdown 2.0 is we're going to walk through each sector and kind of identify the solutions to each thing that we can kind of get to. Oh, come on. Sorry, I'm going to get a new clicker tomorrow. In fact, I have one at home already, so before I bring it. So let's think about electricity. I'm sure I don't need to talk to this group about this, but electricity production, and this is primarily where it's used, a lot of the building, electricity ends up in buildings or sent to industry, a little bit to other things. The solutions to this are going to be pretty obvious. First and foremost, these are the new set of drawdown solutions. I haven't put the numbers up here because we're going to keep them confidential till February. But a whole bunch of them are around energy efficiency. Regardless of the source of electricity, whether it's coal, gas, solar, wind, nuclear, whatever, just be more efficient with what we have. And this building is a great example of things we can do in that space. Huge number of things we can do. In fact, these are probably the most cost-effective climate solutions ever, because they get a double whammy, a lot of them, both for electricity use and heating and cooling spaces and hot water. So building retrofits are massive. And you can see a list, I won't go through it all, of things we do on reducing electricity demand. Second, then shift the electricity we do need, which might be half of what we currently use in many cases, to the low carbon equivalent, whether that's wind or solar or hydro or ocean power, geothermal, and so on. All of these right now are getting cheaper, except nuclear is getting far more expensive every year it goes by, and becoming more and more delays in getting anything built. So we're going to see massive changes in this landscape, and that's why Drawdown from now on will actually release their report every year. We're calling it Drawdown Review from now on because the numbers change all the time, especially prices of solar and wind and batteries. Then we have to also improve the electrical system itself in terms of grids, microgrids, flexibility, storage, cogeneration opportunities, things like this. So energy efficiency, make it green, use less, make what you need green, and make the system better so it's smarter. Okay, that kind of makes sense. Now let's go to ag. Turns out it's the same bloody thing, because about a quarter of climate change is caused by agriculture and land use. Let's dive into where that's from. Most of that is deforestation, places like the Amazon. Then it's the cowbirds and the rice fields over here from methane. Then it's nitrous oxide from the fertilizers and manure. And everything else is a little bit less than 5%. A lot of people, when they think about food and climate change, jump to things like food miles. Is local food better than distant food? Turns out no. Actually, local food usually has a higher carbon footprint in transportation because long distance food is shipped more efficiently on rail and in boats. and very, very efficiently. Local food's great for other things, but it's not a climate solution. It's great for other stuff. Organic versus conventional, nope, not much difference there, and so on. The big things are deforestation, methane, and nitrous oxide. Most of this is meat and forest, okay? That's what you need to think about. So the solutions here are kind of also like electricity. Let's be more efficient. Let's reduce food waste, because 1/3 of the world's food is never eaten, in rich countries and in poor countries. In rich countries, it's near the consumer we waste food. In poor countries, it's because it never got to the market, because of poor infrastructure sometimes, or food spoilage along the way, lack of good cold chain integrity, and so on. So that's a huge opportunity. In fact, food waste was ranked as like the top 3 or 4 climate solutions out of 100 in our last analysis. In fact, it went up in the next analysis. It's number 2. Plant-rich diets is a fancy way of saying eat less meat. But it turns out our marketing friends, remember, I'm talking to them a lot now, tell us, don't tell people what you're taking away, tell people what you're giving them. So when Google instituted Meatless Mondays in their free cafeterias at Google, people went nuts. So that sucks. Don't take away my burgers, I want that. So they just changed the name of it. So it's Plant-Forward Mondays. Same menu, all the complaints went away. Right? So that's great. I love it. You know, so it's like, people are funny, you know? So we call it plant-rich diets instead of less meat diets. But it turns out especially red meat, beef, lamb, and dairy products are very, very carbon intensive. They don't have to be, but right now they are. So eating less of that stuff and allowing more room to grow it differently would be very good for climate change. But you can get most of the way there, by the way, switching just to chicken or especially fish. And oysters actually have a negative carbon footprint. So yeah, they eat oysters, they're good for the planet, so yeah. Because they build shells, and those are absorbing calcium carbonate and CO2 out of the water, making shells out of them, so that's pretty cool. So just changing to different kinds of meat or eating less overall is a really good idea. Seaweed farming is another one, things like this. So again, efficiency first. Then we talk about protecting ecosystems, like especially coastal wetlands, rainforests, and so on. Then we improve the way we grow the food, and we improve the way we manage our forest. So again, similarly to electricity, start with efficiency, then we pivot to do it better, right? Same kind of idea. Then we get to industry, same kind of idea here. Industry is very interesting because there's so many different niches here. We have like steel is a major contributor, cement, other chemicals, within which plastics, by the way, plastic is about a 1% of climate change. And that doesn't count the fact that plastic's a really good way to sequester carbon, actually. I'm not saying let's make plastic, but the energy used to make plastic is about 1% of global emissions. And technically, it's actually locked away in the polymers pretty long time, but that sucks. We don't want to do that. We're not solving climate change by making more plastic crap, okay? But it's funny, in the environmental community, people confuse the plastic issue, which is a solid waste issue, with the climate issue. They're not really at all connected. Then we have other kinds of waste here, wastewater, and so on, and solid municipal waste. So we look at a lot of industry solutions, like alternatives to cements, alternative refrigerants, new bioplastics that don't use the same things, composting, recycling, recycled paper. Those are all kind of nice little niche solutions here. And improving industrial processes, including cogen, maybe even biochar, a whole bunch of other things here we could do. These are just the ones we've looked at so far. Transport, again, you're going to see a similar kind of idea here, is that we look at efficiency, switch, then go to green energy solutions. Transportation is really interesting because most of it, basically the first approximation, all the transportation emissions are on the road. Aviation gets a lot of attention, but it's actually 1.8% of climate change is caused by aviation. And yes, that includes contrails and everything else. Can I bust a myth here, please? Some people say, oh, but the CO2 is emitted high in the atmosphere, therefore it has a bigger impact on climate. Like, no, it doesn't. I'm sorry, I'm an atmospheric physicist. No, it doesn't. It's mixed in the atmosphere within 3 hours, and it lasts there for 1,000 years. It doesn't matter where you emit it. North Pole, South Pole, equator, high, low. It doesn't matter at all to the climate, at all. The only thing it does is the contrails produce a local warming effect above the contrail for about 3 hours. Okay, so the effect of aviation is CO2. It's 1.8%. It's a whole bunch of crap you hear about it on Facebook that's not true. Talk to an atmospheric chemist or physicist and I'll tell you, get it right. But aviation is growing like crazy, and it's a very small number of people are disproportionately causing that. I might be one of them, or I used to be, because ironically my biggest personal carbon footprint is flying to climate change conferences, but I've cut that down by about 3/4 now. So transportation, let's get more efficient, first by reducing the needs for fossil fuel transportation, like telepresence, Project Drawdown, we actually got rid of our offices, we all work from home now and have no office at all, we all eliminated our daily commutes. We can walk more, bicycle, carpooling, and so on. Then we can take our fossil infrastructure and make it more efficient, more fuel efficiency, still lots and lots of opportunities there. Then of course electrify transport, and it helps to do that if the electricity mix is low carbon, or or zero carbon would be ideal, but at least low carbon. So that's it in transportation. In buildings you can see the same kind of thing. I'm not going to go through the details of this too much, but again, efficiency, switching the energy sources and building better systems. And in the other sectors, mainly capturing methane before it gets in the atmosphere. The fugitive emissions are kind of the big sector here. Okay, that was a lot of stuff, but I wanted to nerd out because I thought this might be appreciated. But first job, reduce the emissions, and there are a whole bunch of them. They're not just fossil fuels, there are a whole bunch of other things in there we have to address too. And that's why we need all of us with different kinds of expertise at the table. People know about cement, people know about agriculture, people know about forestry, people know about fluorinated gases, and people certainly know about fossil fuels and renewables. But the second job of getting to drawdown is not to just reduce the sources of greenhouse gases that go into the atmosphere. We also have to protect nature, because nature is doing a huge job for us. This little donut here represents the stuff we put in the atmosphere every year. Imagine that's a big bunch of greenhouse gases. Nature removes about 40% of that every year for free, and we forget about it. Within a few months, this much of the greenhouse gases we put in the atmosphere are absorbed and locked away, mainly by the land and a little bit by oceans. It's 55% of the CO2 we emit, but when we add nitrous oxide and methane and F gases, it's something more like, it's like a 41%. So we have to also make sure that this keeps going. If we continue to degrade forest and soils, and we continue to degrade ocean ecosystems, these sinks could actually begin to degrade, destabilize, and disappear. And that would accelerate climate change. We depend on a subsidy of about half of our greenhouse gas emissions are removed automatically. We've got to make sure those continue. And if we're clever, maybe we can just enhance and add to those sinks a little bit. But I think we're actually in a race to just maintain what we have, given how much we're destroying a lot of these ecosystems. That's going to be the hard challenge. So we want to make sure those are healthy. Most of them are on land, so the things we have to do here are, protect and restore ecosystems, especially peatlands and forest and coastal wetlands. There are a whole lot of things we can do here. We can also improve agriculture. There's a lot of excitement about like regenerative agriculture and putting carbon away in the soils. Be careful there. There are a lot of claims being made, one by, I won't say the name of the company, but a company is promising a teraton of carbon dioxide. You need 5 planets to do that. That isn't even biologically possible on this planet. I've worked on this for years. We've lost less than 1/5 of that much since the last ice age. Okay, so that whoever made that up just made it up. So be very careful, people who don't know about agriculture and the Earth system. There's a lot of stuff we can do here, but their claims are hyperbolic and irresponsible here. But there are things we can do. And regenerative agriculture is very useful, but it's a smaller wedge than some people are saying. But let's do it anyway, because it's a very good idea, but be careful how big you think it might be. It's not going to solve climate change, but it will help. Forestry practices, and especially agroforestry, would be very helpful along the way as well. We also should pay attention to the oceans, protecting and restoring ocean ecosystems, and also improving the way we fish and manage ocean farming. I mentioned oysters. They're actually a small climate solution. Marine protected areas, seaweed farms, all sorts of interesting things we could do here. Okay, then this gets to the part that gets some people very excited, is that yes, nature absorbs greenhouse gases. Maybe we could come up with ways that technology could augment that. Well, those are still pilots. They're pretty exciting. We don't review any of them because there's not enough data to properly do so economically. We have no idea what these would really cost. But we're going to mention them anyway. Like direct air capture for storing carbon, but I'm a lot more interested in direct air capture for using carbon. I want to make jet fuel out of the air that's carbon neutral. That would be pretty cool. I want to make plastics out of the air, and so using petroleum that's carbon neutral or better. Or artificial leaves, or enhance the weathering our carbonate silicate cycles, kind of take what rocks do over hundreds of millions of years and do it over hundreds of years and lock away carbon geologically. These are some pretty exciting ideas, but they're still kind of on the bench to pilot scale. In the next 5 years, we're going to see a massive deployment of these technologies, and we'll find out which ones are going to work, which is really exciting. So reduce emissions, protect nature, and third, we have to help empower people. So this may seem like, why are you including this? Is this just a feel-good thing? Is this just to make us all feel better? Like, no, it turns out there are a lot of things we should do first and foremost because they're human rights objectives. We should do them because they're the right thing to do. But it turns out when you help people, in some cases, helping people helps us actually all combat climate change. And in particular, helping indigenous communities protect their land. 9 times out of 10, when you look at an indigenous community that lives in forest, their forests are more productive and store more carbon with more biodiversity than adjacent forests. There's good data to prove that. Don't believe me, look at a satellite picture of Wisconsin. In the upper kind of left-hand corner, there's a big green square that's much deeper green than everything else around it. It's called the Menominee Nation, okay? Now go to Brazil, you'll see a whole bunch of these. You'll see them in Indonesia and all over the world. So helping indigenous communities with their land rights turns out to be a great climate solution too. And of course, we focus a lot of these in Drawdown 1.0, is family planning and girls' education, which are still woefully lacking in much of the world. Now, I'm a middle-class white guy from America, so I'm like the last person who should talk about this, but it turns out about half the pregnancies on this planet are still unintended. If we can help women make the decisions they want to make, this would bend the curve on some future population growth and future carbon emissions, but without any population control. Those two words should never, ever, ever be used in the same sentence ever again. Okay, this is about human rights, giving people choices, giving people health. So people can have fewer children later in life, but with healthier children, it's healthier outcomes, better choices, and more opportunities. That's kind of how to treat this. So when we put it all together, reduce emissions, protect nature, empower people, we find we have an enormous number of solutions. This came from Drawdown 1.0. We have a better update to this I'll show in a couple months. But this is 80 solutions where we rank them by size, but we have to do them all. Turns out there are lots and lots and lots of solutions in here. There are lots more coming in our next analysis. And this together, that particular scenario prevents about 1,000 gigatons of CO2. It's enough to bend the curve and hit drawdown before 2050. It would cost, we estimate, about $30 trillion. We'd immediately make back about $75 trillion, not even counting the damages we prevented from even worse climate change, which would be in the hundreds of trillions to infinite dollars. So this is a pretty good deal. The only people who lose here are the board members of ExxonMobil, maybe. The rest of the 7.7 billion of us, we do pretty well here, actually. So it's a good return on investment. We have enough solutions to do the job, which is fantastic. And guess what? The good news here is all these are going to be really, really good for us. These are all things that make the world better. We're protecting nature, creating better opportunities, more jobs, more investment, more savings, better security, better health, better everything pretty much, except for a few oil companies and so on. So we need to kind of figure that out. Lessons learned here. First of all, it is not too late to address climate change. We're already a degree warmer. That's bad. We can stop it before it gets to about 1.5-ish range. That would be good. If we don't miss that, then we'll get to 1.6. I'm not giving up. Maybe we'll do 1.7. Anything we can do to prevent a runaway heading into 3, 4, 5 degrees kind of warming is good. Okay, so it's not too late. We can still bend the curve. We need the solutions. We have all of the ones we need now, and now is better than new. I don't want to wait for new technologies because we've wasted 40 years from politicians not listening to us anyway. It's time to deploy what we have now. Yes, 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 I love the fancy new nuclear reactors Bill Gates talks about, and when they're done in 2060 or so, we'll put them in. In the meantime, we'll have already solved the problem. I mean, they're still tying their sneakers while we're racing around the track 5 times. Okay? So we don't have time to wait for new technologies unless they're ready to go like right bloody now. So we'll phase in what we got when we got it. But that means we have to have a roadmap. And let's quickly go through some of this stuff, is really focus on the now, not the new, because time is not our friend. What is ready now? Well, obviously renewables are. They're accelerating faster than Moore's Law. Here's global wind capacity, there's solar. This is extraordinary. Every single forecast I've ever seen for the price of solars has been wrong, for solar panels, is wrong. the price falls faster than anyone has ever predicted. I'm going to beat that, though. I'm going to say they're going to be free as of next year, and that'll be the one forecast that might not be. But otherwise, this is beating Moore's Law, beating every forecast I've ever seen going back 20 years. It's been better performance than we've ever thought, and it's just extraordinary. In fact, if you looked at this is the US, the current levelized price of electricity in the US. Here's the range of prices for solar, for wind, and so on. And you all know this, that in fact, in many parts of the country today, it's better to build an entirely new solar power plant to give you additional generation capacity than operating your current coal power plant. It's better just to blow that up and build a solar farm instead than operating the one you already paid for. That's how cheap this is getting. And they're falling in price all the time. So the age of fossils, appropriately, is over. And we have to move to renewables, but we obviously have a lot of work to do in terms of distribution, storage, implementation, and so on, but the economics work, and the electricity sector is in pretty good shape. In the last year, for example, we've added about 24 gigawatts of new capacity. About half of that's wind, solar, and more advanced natural gas. And guess what, we're retiring. We've retired about 8 gigawatts in production, mostly coal, nuclear, and old natural gas. So that's pretty interesting. The shift is overway. Natural gas is playing kind of that weird intermediary role, but renewables are winning, coal and nuclear are dying. We know that. Okay, that's electricity. That's a quarter of the problem globally, about 10% to 15% in California. Agriculture is a quarter of the problem globally. We also have to think about that there are some quick wins here, especially around deforestation and around food waste. Those don't require new technologies, it's better policy. We have a lot of work to do there. Other things like how we farm better will take longer to roll out, but there's some big quick wins are possible, but just whether we can get them implemented is another question. Efficiency in buildings and transportation are low-hanging fruits right now, and they have been for 40 years. So we have so much more work to do on energy efficiency in buildings and transportation. The fact we still sell cars that get below 50 miles per gallon is, I think, criminal, but we do it anyway. And the Trump administration is trying to undo even the modest CAFE standards we have now. We have to do that better, but those are not technological leaps. Those are things we can do today. After that, in the 2030s and 40s, we're going to have to do things that are harder, that do require more kind of technology and R&D and investment, like reinventing cement, reinventing refrigerants, reinventing how we produce steel. That's going to be the 2030s to 2040s kind of roadmap, and deep, deep infrastructure investments in transportation as we electrify everything and do as much mass transit as possible and have drop-in replacements for aviation fuel. We'll need all that, but that's going to be 10, 20 years out. The good news here is that all of this, I think, is an incredible opportunity. I don't know, a lot of people say, oh my God, we have to rebuild everything. We have to reimagine energy. We have to reimagine agriculture, buildings, transportation. I'm like, hell with that, we get to. This is fantastic. This is the biggest business opportunity in human history. We get to reinvent the world. Remember, we're basically burning dinosaur poop to power our civilization, or what, our old algae. That's crazy. We have so many better ways of doing things today. And if you want to be a 21st century planetary civilization, we get to reimagine that. That's fantastic. But you really think we can go on burning coal and having a food system that wastes a third of what it grows, destroys ecosystems worldwide, and leaves 2 billion people either malnourished or obese? That's satisfactory to you? Hell no, we get to reinvent that because the current systems suck. We get to reinvent them, and we're going to be a lot better off in the process. So that's what we have for solutions. This is how we have to roadmap them, implementation. Love to talk to you about that. But let me wrap up by reminding us what else we need. We need bold vision and bold leadership and a better way of talking about this stuff. This is not a grim future. It can be a great future if we want it to be. And if we want to share that idea with the world and get people on board with us and build that better future, we have to talk about it differently. Martin Luther King did not go around America saying, I have a nightmare, right? He didn't do that, okay? That's what environmentalists do, and politicians do. But Martin Luther King invited us to come together around a common dream. Now, he died for that dream. We're not done with his dream by any stretch of the imagination, but we all know in our hearts and in our bones that that's the right dream. It's the dream we should be. That's the people we ought to be. I think the same thing is true with climate change. And finally, with Greta, frankly, and others like her, we finally have a morally unimpeachable voice who says that. Says, you have failed us. Listen to the science and make a better world for the next generation. because every one of your ancestors did it for you. You adults are failing us. You're the first generation in history to deliberately leave behind a crappy world for your children. Don't do that. Do better. That's what we need to do. So let's rally around a dream that invites people to build a better future. Let's build a vision of a better world and ask people to join us. And that's going to be my ask of you. First is learn more about these issues. None of us could ever be an expert in everything we need to do around climate change. But you all have a lot of expertise we will need. So learn more and share what you know already. Be a resource to others. We're happy to be a resource to anyone. And I know a lot of you are as well. The fact that you're here tonight is emblematic of that. So let's share. Let's give away things. Let's open source the shit out of this, okay? Because we're going to have to, okay? Second is exercise your leadership. Leadership is not obviously going to be found at the COP meetings or at the UN or in DC anymore. We've wasted 40 years with that mythology. It's going to be found in communities, in businesses, in startups, in civil society, as individuals, and maybe eventually the politicians will catch up to us again. But let's find out where the leadership really is, and it's in rooms like this. And that's where the future is going to be built, I think. And remember too, again and again, please remember the future is not going to just passively unfold. It is the future we build. It's still up for grabs. And Robert Wilson likes to remind us that it's up to us to consciously decide to build the future we want. So with that, I'd just like to say thank you, but also encourage you to get out there and help us all build a better future, because we all need to work together. And with that, I'd just like to say thanks, and thanks for the opportunity to be here tonight. Okay.
Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, just shout out a comment or question or something. I'll try to do my best to keep a conversation going. Yeah, I'll try to repeat it. Yes, in the back. Yeah.
Yeah, can you teach us to give this talk?
I'm sure you can do it far better. Actually, kind of, yeah. One of the things we've been asked a lot, I spent a lot of time when I joined Drawdown listening to folks like, hey, what could we do better? Because that book kind of caused, I had nothing to do with that book or Drawdown 1.0. I wasn't even involved in it at all. But I really admired what Chad Frischman and Catherine Wilkinson, Paul Hawken, that whole team did. It was amazing. Is they really kind of surveyed the whole waterfront of climate change in a way nobody had really done before. Even the IPCC hadn't done that before. And instead of writing a whole bunch of technical papers, they wrote a coffee table book. And it's the best-selling climate book of the last decade. Well, admittedly, to be the best-selling climate book in the world is not the same as Stephen King or Michelle Obama. Or, they're not worried about our book sales, believe me. But it's doing really well. So, but one of the things we heard was a lot of people said, boy, I'd really like to have a set of slides that I could adapt for my community and give it in my own voice, just like Al Gore does with the Climate Reality Project. In fact, a lot of people who've done that said, we'd really like Drawdown to help us because we have all these Gore slides, which are kind of Gore-y. They're, no pun intended, yes, pun absolutely intended. They're all about the climate problem and how scary it is, but we'd like to talk more about solutions. So actually, we've joined with Climate Reality Project now a couple of times and done a training on Drawdown communication in Minneapolis and Atlanta. We're going to give away a slide deck like this starting in February 20th, along with our new report and a whole bunch of new infographics materials. And yes, we're open sourcing the hell out of it. That's why we're not using a book anymore.
If you're doing it, we could organize a training with this.
Yeah, I'd love to. Actually, if you want to be guinea pigs, because we haven't really done it before. I'd love to, take some, volunteers/victims.
Well, Climate Reality also encourages their leaders to build those kind of slides
Yeah.
if they want.
Exactly. But there's a lot of homework goes into this stuff, so if we can save you some time and build a little community around it, we'd be happy to. So great suggestion. We're kind of working on it. We'll be there. How about into the side? I'm working this way to this side of the room. How about, yes?
I'll stand up. So first, this was an amazing talk. I told you I would have to leave early, but I stayed.
Sorry for the other appointment.
But I found one of the things very compelling is sort of we're not, a lot of these things aren't just good for climate. They're good for all these other issues that we care about. So to what extent, and to kind of renew Drawdown 2.0, are you building common cause around public health and plant-rich diets? Or
Yes.
What?
Yeah. Oh, thank you for saying that. Yeah, the first thing we're doing in February is updating the whole Drawdown framework. And then about every other month from now on, we're going to be issuing kind of special reports where we dive into particular areas. One of them will be exactly what you said, the public health benefits of doing climate solutions. There have been a lot of studies showing the public health crap that'll happen from climate change if we do nothing. Like, okay, it's going to be really bad. But what if we did stuff? Guess what? Oh, walkable cities. Hey, that's a great obesity thing. Or better air quality. A lot of these are modulated by air quality, vector-borne diseases, and infrastructure around walking, obesity, things like this. So guess what? This is like the best prescription pad for the planet. It's like, hey, this will make people healthier too, by the hundreds of millions. That's a pretty good day. I like that. And you know what? People care a lot more about health, the economy, jobs, and security than they do about atmospheric CO2 levels. And I don't blame them. And again, like that list of stuff I showed, there's not a bad thing on them, really, if we do them right with equity and justice and economic kind of parity included in this. So we have to be careful there. But that's a great suggestion. So we're going to talk a lot about co-benefits, in other words, of the solutions, not just the bad stuff climate change will do to all of us, but the good things solving it could do for us. So yeah, good suggestion. We're kind of starting on that.
Social cost of carbon?
Yeah, the concept that you mentioned, like the social cost of carbon, which is the idea that, when we put a ton of CO2 in the atmosphere, what is the damage it does to society? Of course, that depends a lot on, the who. There's probably no one number for that, and there's a lot of other issues there. But great question, exactly. Let me move to this kind of through this side of the room. We'll go back and hop around. Yeah, gentleman here.
Two comments. I really love what you're doing. One comment is on the pie charts. It shows, for example, a very small percentage for methane, a small, very tiny percentage for refrigerants, and a very large part of the pie chart is on CO2 emissions. I think that's by volume. I'd like to see a pie chart that showed the impact on climate change.
No, those are adjusted for radiative forcing. Those are what we call global warming potentials. They are equivalent amounts of CO2 adjusted because they're even smaller by volume and mass. But when you, sorry, I jumped ahead, but we actually did that calculation where we do like 1 molecule of methane traps about 30 to 50 times more heat than a molecule of CO2. This took that into account.
So that chart shows it, and it is a relatively small part of the chart.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other comment was, I love what Drawdown is preaching to the converted. I love what you guys are doing, but I think there's a need for a book to reach another half of the country that used to be in denial, and now because of floods and droughts, and they're beginning to feel the impacts. I think a book that maybe was a little more neutral that said, well, what is climate change? How does it work? I think we need something to reach the other half of the world.
Yeah, great question. So ask about reaching the, quote, other half of the country, let's say, about climate change. Guess what? Quiz time. How many people in America today, what fraction of the US population thinks climate change is not real?
Ooh, I know this one.
Don't answer it. That's cheating. 25? 12? 30? 37? 40? It's 7. More people believe the Earth is flat than believe climate change is never happening. That's true, by the way. There are people who think the Earth is flat. I love the Flat Earth Society. They literally had a tweet once that said, the Flat Earth Society literally said on social media, we have members around the world. Around the globe, yeah. We have members around the globe. I'm like, yeah, okay. Yeah. We're on that, yeah. So Americans actually do believe in climate change. This is a very well-funded, very loud subset of that group that's being paid to say that and confuse the hell out of us. This is the classic playbook of industries who don't want change. The tobacco industry did this, the asbestos industry did this, and again, and again, and again. Classic playbook. And all of us, I was convinced that wasn't true either, but it's a minuscule amount. You don't even have to worry about it.
No, I think you're right. The comment I'm trying to make is to address the people that, well, I
they're in
see
the middle.
climate change happening, but I still like my Lexus. All right,
Yeah. Well, the thing that Drawdown's done that's pretty cool, the thing we've lacked is like a big PR budget and the ability to project into the hundreds of millions range. We're working on that. But the thing that Drawdown's been pretty interesting. Again, I had nothing to do with it, so when I say these things, it isn't self-congratulatory at all. That's why I joined the organization. Because they actually have the kind of best approval ratings, like in terms of book reviews or other things of anything written about climate change. Al Gore's books have either 5 stars on Amazon or 1. Naomi Klein's books have either 5 stars or 1. They're hyper-polarizing around culture wars. We actually, when we're read by, let's say, red state Republicans in rural areas, for example, love this book. They're like, oh, this is a can-do, America, roll up your sleeves, let's get to work kind of tone. It's shown me how I can create jobs and so on. I mean, the first city in the country that went to 100% renewable electricity is Georgetown, Texas, which is like one of the most red places in the country. Because it was about jobs, and it made sense. They have a lot of wind and a lot of sunshine, so like, duh. And so that's the tone we take. We're not playing games, we're trying to bring people together, and solutions do that far more than problems. So talking about, these are the three keys, I think, to one of the key voices in the climate conversation needs to be voices of hope, not just voices of fear. We need voices around solutions, not just voices around problems. And in a hyper-polarized country where we're all so sick of it, everyone is. The Republicans are, the Democrats are, we're all tired of this. Emphasizing collaboration and showing examples of when we can work together actually draws more people together. Let's stop being hijacked by the 7% over here and the 7% over there. The 80-something% of us in the middle are really freaking tired of it. That's who we want to talk to, exactly what you're saying. And I think we got to do a better job of that. Let's do a couple more, and I think we got 8 minutes left or so. Yeah, yes, sir.
Energy efficiency seems pretty prominent in
Yep.
a lot of the solutions, especially for buildings. It's also probably one of the oldest set of solutions.
Yeah.
And the most universal.
Yeah.
And notoriously hard to do well.
Yeah.
Have you identified anything that would accelerate that? Any trends that you've seen as you've analyzed things around the country? Like PG&E and every
Yeah.
utility, they all want to do energy efficiency.
Yeah, that's what, we're not any, we are not experts on the deep #1 expert on any of these issues. So anything we'd say about energy efficiency has been said before by Amory Lovins or RMI or WRI or whoever. But you're pointing at a really weird paradox. Like, this is the lowest hanging fruit, still staring us in the face. We don't pick them all. Actually, I don't think it's hard at all. I've now lived in 8 houses since I've been an adult, either owning or renting or something like that, and I've managed to cut the CO2 emissions of everywhere I've lived by about 60% on the first month I've lived there, by just replacing a few appliances, not spending a lot of money either. It was like, this is so obvious, so easy, and I can't believe. In San Francisco, the apartment I moved into still had incandescent lights and leaky windows. I'm like, what the hell, And I couldn't believe it. What is going on here? This is insanity. Or that we still sell cars that get 18 miles per gallon, or big pickup trucks that nobody uses for anything other than just look cool, or what in other parts of the country. Like, what are we doing? I don't understand that at all. I think it's a psychological issue. I think it's kind of an issue of behavioral economics and also culture wars and things like this. It's not about engineering or science or dollar economics. Those are so obvious. So I think we need to employ a lot more kind of behavioral economists, more social psychologists, more marketing people to figure out how do we make energy efficiency cool. Because everybody wants the Tesla, everybody wants the Impossible Burger, everybody wants the cool, sexy new thing, and we argue about, is it nuclear power, or the wind thing, or the solar thing. Nobody wants to argue about weather stripping. Well, maybe 3 of you in this room do. That guy, I know. Oh, I really like the 2300 Kelvin bulbs, not the 2700 Kelvin, LED. There'll be 5 of you in the world that will argue over that, but the rest of us want to talk about solar and wind. I'm like, but I have the solutions to stop using whatever the hell it is you have, Food waste. The least controversial climate solution, yet, and the most obvious one, but yet we don't do much about it. 1/3 of the food we waste. Fortunately, it's not polarizing. Food waste is, I've never met anybody from the pro-food waste lobby. They've never come after us. Maybe, are you here? I've been waiting for you for a long time. Oh, you're the one, I've been waiting for you, thank you. I'm like, nobody's really, but we still have so much left to do. I wish I knew the answer to your question, because it's kind of one of the obvious, duh. First rule of stopping climate change, stop being dumb. That's what I should have written, but it's a little insulting, if you put it in a slide, but a lot of the stuff we're doing is kind of dumb. We don't have to. We can be better and smarter about it. And yet, the good news, the bad news is we're really inefficient with energy, water, food. The good news is we're really inefficient with energy, water, and food. Look at all that opportunity we've yet to pick. If we were already at max efficiency, and we're still running the planet, we'd be kind of screwed. We don't want to break the laws of physics, and we don't need to, because there's a lot of efficiency left to go. Anyway, thanks for asking that, because it's such an important question. Yes?
So how important to a practical strategy for drawdown do you think is stopping regulatory capture and repealing Citizens United?
Yeah, we're going to stay a little neutral on some of the... asking a question, sorry, I should repeat that, about things like repealing Citizens United or regulatory capture and so on. Obviously very, very important. That's a bigger conversation than we can have in the few minutes I've got here. we are very, very engaged in policy making, but I like to look at it at a range of levels. As you know, in this room, obviously, a lot of the climate policy making action, and Hal Harvey makes this point a lot. I think he says something like, there are about 100 people in America who really control climate policy, and you never heard of any of them. And they're not members of Congress, and they're not in the White House. They're the people who run the PUCs, people who run zoning boards, people who decide where the muni is going to go, that kind of stuff. That's a hell of a lot of policy making is happening at the local, county, state level, and it isn't sexy, but that's a lot of where stuff. The activists don't care about that, but that's where we should be active. So as well as what's happening in DC and so on. So I think just kind of look at where the levers are for action and pull everyone you can. And about, the political landscape we have, which is affecting everything we do, even who's in government, not to mention what they do, is pretty disappointing right now, to say the least. And, that's a whole, we should all drink heavily tonight and talk about that later. How about over here, and then we'll come back to the middle? Yes?
So you mentioned that policy changes is one of the most important things that needs to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Even just
Yeah.
mentioned, food waste, composting is
Yep.
not mandated in every city. It is here in San Francisco, in Berkeley, and I think Oakland.
Mhm.
But then you go east of the Caldecott Tunnel and it's not.
Yeah.
So do you have some sort of curated list of policies that are happening where people can get engaged? So for example, I work in the solar industry, and trying to keep track of all of the policies that are happening behind closed doors is like a full-time job. I rely heavily on the California Solar and Storage Association, who they send out these emails and they say, hey, this thing's happening. There's going to be votes behind closed doors on this. Send an email to your lawmaker, and it takes a few seconds. Do you have something like that that covers all the different solutions that you're proposing?
No, we'd love to, because like you said, but you also said that's like a full-time job. Believe it or not, everything we're doing is only 6 people in our entire organization are full-time doing this.
There's a website. There's a website with all these.
Yeah, there are some, but anyway, your point is really well taken. What we'd like to do is we show solutions. What we call, by the way, we call a solution is a thing with a material change in the atmosphere. A physical thing happened, like less gas went in or more gas got pulled out. That's what we call a solution. A policy is not a solution. It's a solution enabler, or what we call an accelerator. So we point out there are lots of accelerators that can help get good ideas into the real world. One of them is policy change, and it happens at all levels, from local to international. But there's also capital flows, like banking, investing, the rules of investing, venture capital, impact investing, private equity, commercial banks, lending banks, whatever, all those things. It's also changes in business rules, kind of soft policy, business, what they do internally. But it's also culture and behavioral change. We're going to need them all. And what I'd like to just stress, but I probably don't have to in this audience, is no one of those is going to solve this alone. We need behavior change at the individual level, and policy change at larger scales, and rules of capital flow, and technology change, and commercial practices changing all at the same time at every possible scale, and it's going to be messy as hell. And there's no one roadmap to that. I wish there was. Maybe we need to go build that. But within those individual sectors, there are organizations like you just mentioned. That sounds like a great one. For within solar policy issues, but hopefully all of you have resources like this, but I don't know of the one master, here's where it's all put together. That'd be very cool, but I don't know that yet. I guess time for one last question, maybe? Okay, yes, how about right here?
Make it good.
Do you have a good question?
I have a quick one.
Okay, oh, even better.
Are you hiring? It sounds like you need more people.
We will be later. Those of you with the whatever color stick here, stay away. I don't have any jobs right now. We did have back off because we don't have the money right now. We will be hiring more next year for sure. But I have to go raise a bunch of money now because we're going to quadruple the size of our organization over the next 18 months.
Well, if you keep giving presentations like this, I bet you can do it.
Oh, we'll see. Thanks. But we did just hire somebody. Well, we haven't hired. We have maybe some of you apply. This would be awkward. We just had a position for the head of Drawdown Labs, this new business association, and about 180 people have applied. And we're walking through all that. We're still, if you are one of those 180, I have not gotten back to you because we're still reading them all very carefully. And it's a ridiculously overqualified pool of applicants. Like, oh my God, I want to hire 50 of them, but I can only afford one. So that's why it's been taking a while. So that's kind of cool. The good news is there are a lot of great people who want to work on this kind of stuff, and what you all do and what we all do together. So what I'd like to do is, if you don't mind, I'd like to thank all of you for coming to something like this, but more importantly for the work you do. You know, it's so dispiriting to see what happened in Madrid this last week, but you know what? You know, I won't drop the F-bomb, but you know, F those guys. The real action in the world is in rooms like this. It's going to be collaborations of, you know, people who are like rolling up their sleeves and getting stuff done. I don't know, but I'm just tired of the politicians wasting our time. We need them, but you know what? They need us even more. And the world needs us to stand up and do what you're doing now and do it better than ever, and do it with other people, and make sure you engage people outside of your usual circles, because it's going to be the ecosystem of all of us that addresses this problem, not any one of us, and certainly not some politician. So we're going to need all of us working together, and I'm so encouraged today actually to see a room of people like you on a Thursday night in the rain, coming to hear some nerd talk about climate stuff. That's pretty encouraging, or very weird. But it can be both. But thank you all for what you do. It's really, really inspiring, everything you do every day. So thanks so much.
We have a few more things on the agenda, and then there'll be cake and sparkling cider.
So to keep the conversation going, you know, we set up Slack. His talk and all the talks that the last couple of years is on our YouTube channel. So basically, if you put the word ClimateLink and then, you know, suffix at the end, so Slack for our Slack, videos for YouTube, news for our monthly newsletter. We post in the newsletter. We share about jobs, about events, things that are going on in the global ecosystem, things of, you know, new funding sources if you're raising money. So yeah, please join in. Oh, there was two of the same. So in just a bit, we will have the rest of our party with a raffle for some cool prizes. The thermostats were sponsored by?
Sponsored by OhmConnect. We have 2 Nest E thermostats that they generously donated for tonight's auction or giveaway.
If you don't know OhmConnect, you should sign up for it. It's a demand response program. They pay you to not use electricity during, you know, peak times. And then once we get through this, we'll have cake and spider. But before we get through that, you know, this is the time brought to have the new year. We usually make resolutions, and then 3 weeks later we drop them. So I would like, you know, and encourage and beseech all of you to make a climate resolution for this coming year. One, probably the easiest and the single most impactful thing you can do is vote for a candidate that accepts climate science. Make a resolution to, you know, bike, walk, not drive to work 1 day a week. Saying you're going to do it every day, 5 days a week, is not realistic, and then you'll give up. You know, if you don't already work for a company, like building a solution, get your company that's, you know, not in this space to do more. You can move your money and your investments, and that's the space I'm in, and I'm happy to, you know, talk to you about it. And you can electrify your life, solarize it. You know, on the right-hand side, there's some different support systems. So on the voting, there's the Environmental Voter Project, there's E2 and Vote Solar. Those are all great.
The Environmental Voter Project is actually really awesome. I'm assuming everyone here would identify as to say that they're environmentalists. What they say is that us environmentalists don't vote. They're not trying to convince people to vote environmentalists. They're just trying to get those who already identify as that to vote. So to Ravi's first point, go out and vote. Get your environmentalist friends to actually show up to the polls.
There's a significant number of quote-unquote environmentalists that don't vote, like in any election. And so for every $25 that they raise, it creates a new voter. And over the last 3 years, in the polls where they've worked, they've shifted the votes the races by 2 to 3%, which doesn't sound by a lot, but if you know like elections, that's actually very significant. You can ask Hillary Clinton what 3% is. That's straight from their talk. Yeah. So or Al Gore, many people. So as Jonathan mentioned, I'm starting a bank, and as pretty much everything else here, it's called ClimateLink Bank. For right now, so if you go there, you can sign up to be alerted. Sometime next year, basically, the big banks are the biggest lenders and funders of fossil fuel extraction. We want you to shift your deposits from them to this bank, and we'll use that to fund these solutions, renewable energy, electrification, eventually the other sources once they're bankable. So once again, thank you all for coming out. Thank you, Jonathan, for speaking tonight. And with that, we have cake somewhere, sparkling cider also somewhere, and we've got prizes here. So under